My husband's name is Genka. Genka and I got married back in college. Of course, I told him, let's wait, you still have to go in the army. But he insisted, I want my wife to wait for me, not my bride. Fast forward and we were married and stood in line waiting for housing. Again, I offered to rent a corner somewhere in the city or temporarily live with my parents, but Genka again showed stubbornness. He is a man with a rural upbringing, so he believed that a wife should move into her husband's house. That's how we ended up in the village, in the house where his parents lived. Getting to school and then to work was a nightmare, but I didn't dare to argue with my husband. The day came when Genka had to leave for his assignment. I saw off my husband, but I stayed living with his family. I thought maybe I would run back to my parents, but I knew that would offend my new relatives. The four of us lived together in that house. Me, Vasily, Genka's father, a gloomy and quiet person with an eternally downcast look. Svetlana, Genka's sister. She was 25 and unmarried. And then there was Maria Potnapova, mother-in-law. The latter was imperious and constantly dissatisfied with something, and it seemed she was the commander in the house. She was not delighted with me, and did not particularly hide the fact that she would like her son to marry a hard-working village girl instead of a FIFA city like me. Yet she put up with my presence in the house, and in any case, she pretended to be civil. Genka and Sveta is a nickname for Svetlana, also had an older brother called Simon, but he lived somewhere in the north and did not communicate with his relatives. I was trying to find out from my husband what the reason was, but he wouldn't tell me. He did say that Semyon was 12 years older than him, and he was just a kid when he left. Long story short, before leaving the village, Simon married his first wife, but she passed away. I'm not sure why, but apparently the grief was unbearable, along with the memories. So he moved up north for a fresh start, but I digress. So I stayed in the village, and after some time, I began to notice something was wrong. It seemed that I could eat and I could drink and I could sleep properly. But when I woke up in the morning, by God, I felt horrendous and lethargic. I felt as if my body was broken. My head hurt, my bones hurt, and sometimes I could hardly get out of bed. Well, one day, a strange thing happened. I woke up in the middle of the night, but I couldn't move. I'm lying as if I'm paralyzed. Meanwhile, someone is walking around my room, but I don't understand who. It is too dark, and it seemed as if there was some kind of a veil over my eyes. All I could see was a black figure moving past me, back and forth, but then suddenly it dissipated. It was the scariest experience of my life. I tried to scream, call for help, but I couldn't. My tongue was like stone, I couldn't budge. Then I heard a whisper, such an ominous whisper, causing goosebumps to spread down my neck. It was so strange. The voice sounded human, and I can hear it quite distinctly, but I can't make out any words, as if my night guest was talking in some foreign language. How long I lay there in complete horror I cannot say, but at some point I fell back to sleep, into oblivion. I woke up in the morning, again exhausted and sick. I must have been dreaming. How crazy. I looked in the mirror and I gasped in shock. I looked like a walking nightmare. They put things in coffins that are more beautiful, but my new family seemed not to notice anything wrong at all. The mother-in-law, busy in the kitchen, Svetka, started talking about the weather as if nothing had happened, and Vasily buried himself in the newspaper. So, without waiting for any sympathy from anyone, I had a quick bite to eat and trudged on to the bus. On the way, I met Aunt Lisa, a neighbour who lived 2 houses away from us. Oddly enough, she noticed how ill I looked and asked if everything was okay. When I complained about feeling weak and sick, at first, of course, Lisa giggled and asked, "Are you pregnant?" But after I assured her that I was not pregnant, I was already convinced I wasn't. Then I told her about the strange dream. Aunt Lisa suddenly grew gloomy and said in a serious, quiet tone, "Listen to me carefully. I'm not messing around. You need to stick a sewing needle above the door tonight to your room. Just do it and you'll feel better." "Why?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "Don't ask." The neighbour seemed embarrassed. "But just listen, a needle. Stick it in." After a day's work, I returned home, and only in the evening, lying in bed, did I remember about the advice that Aunt Lisa gave me. Not really understanding what I was doing or why, I got up, found a sewing needle, and stuck it over the door. The night passed normally, and the next, and the next. I woke up quite cheerful, without headaches or weakness. But then, the fourth night I will remember for the rest of my life, I woke up to somebody pounding on my door. Someone was forcibly trying to break into my room. But the thing is, the door wasn't locked. It can't be locked as there isn't a lock on it. But at the same time, it sounded as though it was reinforced with a barn lock. But again, I knew for sure that there was no lock on that door. No questions about it. Locking doors was not accepted in my husband's house. Trembling with fear, I pressed myself into the pillow, waiting for what would happen next, and somewhere in the depths of my soul, still hoping that this was just a dream. And the next second I heard the voice of my mother-in-law. "Open the door!" And a few more hits, and again, "Open the door!" The voice definitely belonged to Maria Podnapova, but at the same time, it was strange somehow, like hoarse, as if she'd caught a cold. However, the evening before, she seemed completely fine. Someone, of course, will say, well, what's wrong? They would get up and ask what she needed. I don't know how to explain it, but at that moment, something unknown made me want to shrink into a ball and not make a sound. "Open the door! Open the door! Open! Open! Open!" My heart was pounding like crazy. If the mother-in-law simply came for some reason of her own, what was stopping her from opening the unlocked door? She wasn't disabled or infirm, as they say, and a couple of times I remember she walked in on Genka and me without even knocking. In the city, I was a Komsomol activist, and I didn't want to hear anything about God. But right then and there, quite unexpectedly, I found myself praying. I suppose pray is a big word. I just lay there whispering non-stop, "God, dear God, help me, save me, save me, save me, help me." And then I remembered that my deceased grandfather, and I prayed to him too. For some time, the assault on my door continued, but at some point everything just calmed down. I just lay there until dawn, afraid and unable to make a move. In the morning, I took the first bus back to the city. I only came back to pack my things. I was met by Vasily and Svetlana. The mother-in-law, as they explained, was unwell in the morning and she was lying in her bedroom. I gave them a pre-prepared story that at work they began to demand I came in earlier, so I, only for the sake of convenience, would move back to my parents. They shook their heads and scolded my insolent superiors, but they did not persuade or restrain me. Well, after a while, they gave me a room in a hostel. My uncle, who was working at that time as a chief engineer at a large plant, connected his connections, and the turn came to me earlier than it should have. I did not visit my husband's relatives, only occasionally called Svetlana at the service because she also worked in the city, and inquired how they were all doing. The sister-in-law, oddly enough, did not reproach me for anything. I note that I began to feel great. All the sores disappeared as if by hand, and nothing strange happened in my life anymore. Maria died shortly after Genka returned from the army. Something happened to her heart. Her father-in-law survived her only by 6 months. Strange, but almost immediately after the death of his mother, Simon showed up. He himself wrote a letter to Genka and soon came to visit with his family. Since then, we have been communicating like this. Either they are visiting us or we are staying with them. He does not like to talk about his mother, but from the short stories it became clear the following. Sayoma got married for the first time early. He was not even 20 years old. The girl was the same age as him. She was very intelligent, especially by village standards. Her father was the director of a rural school. Her mother was a teacher there. This fact wildly annoyed Maria. She believed that the daughter-in-law should plough like a horse and obey her in everything. Natasha was the name of the wife. She studied at university and she read all her books, and she was not a weak character. She could put the mother back in her place. What happened next is a dark matter. They say that Natalie, for no reason at all, began to wither and fade before their eyes. No treatment helped, and even after the death, the doctors shrugged and could not determine the exact cause. I still haven't gotten details from Semyon, but for some reason he blamed his mother for everything that happened. I don't know what the grounds were for that, I won't lie, but whatever it was, that made him leave. I myself never told my family about that terrible night either. Still, Maria was the mother of my husband, and I didn't want to, and I don't want to blacken her memory, and Genka really loved her. And who was she really? God knows. The witch's fame did not go around the village about her. But for some reason, the neighbour Lisa still asks me to keep a pin stuck in the door. It's weird. I also wanted to say a few words about my husband's sister, Svetlana, whose personal life categorically did not develop, and almost a month after her mother's death, she met a young man, a graduate of the military school, who came to the village to visit a friend. She soon married him and also flew away from her native land all the way to the Far East, to her husband's duty station. For some time after that, Svetlana wrote letters and sent photographs, and then suddenly she disappeared from sight. Numerous requests and search attempts that Genka made at one time were unsuccessful. Both Svetlana and her husband seem to have flown to another planet. Even much later, when we, with the help of our already adult children and grandchildren, tried to find them, or at least their relatives, through social networks, could find nothing. However, that's probably a completely different story. Hi everyone, thank you so much for listening if you made it this far. If you did enjoy the video, please do give me a thumbs up and possibly subscribe if you'd like to. That would really make me so happy, and I'd be eternally grateful. Yes, as you can tell, I'm completely new at this. But yes, thank you for your support, and I hope to see you in the next video.